Hey everyone, I'm the Bella Gamer, and we're back after our Christmas break. So, excuse me. So sorry if you missed me. Man, I'm already getting burpy. When you talk, you just suck in so much air, and then it just comes out when you start talking. It sucks. Anyway, holidays, they're great, right? I was really busy, and it was kind of stressful, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing my family, and I always will advocate for everyone to go and do the same. So we didn't make any content for, a couple weeks. I apologize for that, but we're back and we're getting started. We also have a new series starting this week. Don't know if we're gonna keep it around. It hasn't been doing the best, but we'll see. We might do it in a week or two. The Monster of the Week. I really think it's a good video series, but you know, audience will determine what goes on the channel and what doesn't in the end. But we're going to go ahead and cut the chaff. You already know what this video is about. I don't know why I started so many of these videos pretending like you didn't know what was coming, knowing that the thumbnail and the video title will tell you what it is. So yeah, we're just going to get back to why this class is awesome with the Witch. So I actually really like the Witch. I think it's very thematic for a spellcaster, and it's a good addition to what was already the glorious, not trifecta, but quadfecta, I guess, of wizard, druid, cleric, and bard. But the Witch is really good, and we're gonna go right into why the Witch is awesome. First, I actually want to read for you all a really good clip at the very top. When you look into the Witch, it's a sidebar in the book, I think, but if you look at Archive of Nethys, which I always recommend you do, I'm gonna read this clip here at the top about: in service to the unknown. A witch's patron is a mysterious entity rarely known or understood even by the witch in the patron's service. The nature of the relationship between a witch and their patron can serve as details for a character's development and storytelling. When playing a witch, work with your GM to determine the nature of your patron and how much of the nature you know, both as a player and character. There are countless ways to handle a witch's patron. The following are just a few approaches you might take. For a character who truly doesn't know their patron, you might have your GM choose your patron's theme and which lessons your witch learns, as the patron determines what powers to best bestow upon you as their emissary. And these can provide clues to your patron's nature. You could instead give your DM a list of lessons you would like for your character and let your GM choose between them, representing a negotiation between your witch and the patron. In this case, you might choose your patron's theme to indicate which aspect of the patron relates to your character, or let your GM choose the theme. If you want to fully be in control of your abilities, you can choose the lesson you most prefer and let your GM tailor the identity of your patron accordingly. Another approach is for you to craft the details of your witch's patron yourself. You can provide those details to your DM to incorporate into a larger narrative, or to provide additional flavor and role-playing context for your character. A character might still remain ignorant of the patron's identity, even if the player knows what it is. Perhaps your character knows the nature of their patron, but is cursed to never reveal it to others. You might have willingly sworn a pact to your patron, but fear the repercussions should others learn of the pact. Or perhaps you and your patron are entirely forthcoming about your relationship. Which really weird line there at the end. It makes it sound like you guys are just in some kind of secret, relationship. Every witch is different and no story is wrong, so long as it's fun and engaging for everyone involved. And I really like that very last line there as well, just for the fact that it talks about what's important in tabletop, which is, it's all about the fun. The rules and the narrative are just there to suit your needs and the other players. It's cooperative. This one, especially between the GM and the player, but you can also incorporate some of this stuff with your fellow co-players. And what I love about the Witch, and why I like it as a spellcaster all to its own, is the fact that the Witch gets this kind of narrative baked into it. They have this interesting theme or this interesting mystery baked in to make it so that you have something interesting right out the gate. I think that's amazing, and I think it's really good. It's just something that can help, especially players who have a hard time making backstories for this character. This will go a long way to getting your character set right out the gate. Another factor about the Witch that I really enjoy is that it is the most familiar-centric class in the game. Now, I know the Summoner or the Conjuration Wizard, that's what it was, gets enhanced familiar stuff as well, but the Witch is based around enhanced familiars, and they get a bunch of feats dedicated just to that. But not only that, because the Witch is so familiar centric, they can get access to some of the specific familiars a lot earlier. And we'll go into one of those in a second. But another aspect I wanted to mention first is the Witch's familiar also counts as equivalently their spellbook. This is great story potential. At any time, the DM can initiate just the familiar gets a message from the patron and wants to teach the Witch an uncommon spell or ritual even. And that's something that can really initiate a scene with the player and gives the DM just a lot of material to work with. The whole narrative of learning spells through your familiar is also wonderful story fodder for your character. There's no limit to the number of ways the story can be spun about what part your familiar plays in your character's kind of overall narrative. And honestly, it can just be something small and minute. A lot of witch characters, even in like famous Pathfinder lore stuff, have very like background character-esque familiars. So it's as much as you want it to be, but I think it's just really good for storytelling potential. And I love the specific familiars. The one I'm going to mention for this video specifically is the calligraphy worm. You get a little drakeling, dragonling, whatever. They have dark vision, they can fly, they have manual dexterity so they can open doors and manipulate objects for simple tasks. They have scent, which is really good because it means that invisible creatures cannot be unnoticed by them as long as they're within their scent range, which I think is 30 feet. And they're skilled in both Arcana and Society, giving them, some options to help you in certain situations. The calligraphy worm can help decode messages with their Society skill, after all. There's a lot of really fun things. And they get 2 additional unique skills, which is the reason why you get a specific familiar, which is the Stylus Claw, which is really cool. It just means your familiar has an unending ink pen for a talon that it can write with. Or you can write with the familiar, which I think is really cool. Very aesthetic. They also have ink spray, which is really cool. It acts like the glitter dust spell. The only difference is that it blinds the target, but they can remove it as an action, and it can reveal them if they go invisible. Something really cool and very interesting. I think the calligraphy worm is really good specific familiar you can start out with. You can get it as early as level 6 if you do take the enhanced familiar feat, which I always recommend as a witch because then it just gives you access to these cool kind of familiars earlier. Another one of the witch's unique aspects is their connection to their patrons, which can adjust what traditions they cast with, and their hex spells, which are a unique type of modifier for the spells that they can cast. There's some things that affect hexes specifically. They have some feats that target hexes specifically, as well as a variety of other out-of-game effects that DMs can utilize that make hexes more or less powerful, which is really good for storytelling potential. But the patrons are really cool. They have a good number in right now, and each of the patrons, I'm not going to get into it all here. You can obviously go to Archive Nethys to look them up and read on them yourselves. In fact, I think they just released a new patron with the Mythic Creatures book, so I'd definitely go check that one out. One of the things I really wanted to mention, though, is that it can change your casting tradition. The witch is essentially a wizard who acts more like a sorcerer. They pick a patron. Most of them are occult, but they do have divine, primal, and arcana, which I think is really good. Gives you a good amount of choices for your spell diversity. It lets you really kind of tailor what your casting is like. And they also provide their own unique focus spells as well. A lot of them having really good hex cantrips. Again, I really, really recommend you go and look them up, but I'm going to actually go into some of my favorites here. One thing I do want to mention, though, about the hex focus spells that witches get, Phase Familiar, I like the concept, but I dislike the implication of when you would use it. So one of the things that can happen to witches, depending on the DM and what table you're at, you get fireballed, your minion is on you, your minion's going to take damage. I think that's really lame. I really don't like that. Your familiars do have a fair amount of hit points, but I really don't see a need to. Familiars are not that big of a combat boon more often than not. And taking them away, killing a familiars kind of just feels bad. It makes sense of the players intentionally using a familiar for certain situations to spy or whatever. Then I think it's okay to attack a familiar. But the thing about it is this spell only has a 60-foot range. So you're not really scouting from all that too far unless you're right on the other side of a wall or something. I really like the idea of using a reaction to save your familiar. I just wish they made this into like a hex cantrip or something that was used more, without using a focus point, or eliminate the range of the spell so you can scout with your familiars more easily. And, then the focus point is more worth it. But 60 feet, face familiar, just I have some problems with, but I don't think it's bad. I just don't like the implications in the game for it. Evil Eye is a really great cantrip. It's a fear effect that you can make with a single action. You don't need to make a skill check. The enemy just needs to make a will save against your spell DC. And one of the things about it is they can't reduce their frightened condition below 1 as long as you're sustaining the spell. That's really good. Fear's a really good status ailment that makes it so that their DCs and ACs are reduced by 1, which can be really nuts. And there's a lot of things that focus around enemies that are feared as well. There's lots of feats and lots of abilities as well. I think this is a really good one, and it's a single action. I do believe the target becomes immune no matter what their effect is for, I think, what is it? It's immune for a minute. So you can only really use it once per target, but that's really good. And it's a hex cantrip, so you can use this on every single enemy in the battlefield. Well, you can only sustain one at a time, but one of the things about it is if it falls off of someone, then you can just bring it on over to someone else with your next action. So I think it's a really good cantrip, and I think it's very good utility, really emphasizes what the witch is all about. Stoke the Heart is probably my favorite hex cantrip. It's amazing as a cantrip. You can throw it on to an ally, and up to a minute sustained, of course. They get a bonus to their damage of +2, and then every odd spell level it tightens, it increases by an additional +1. This is really good. Obviously, the spell does more damage the more times your ally attacks. So if you got a monk in your team, you got a flurry ranger, whatever, this spell does amazing damage. And it's just extra damage. It's a status bonus of damage, which may conflict with some things, but not a whole bunch, honestly. They do become immune to it for a minute after the spell is cast, which really doesn't mean a whole bunch because most combats don't last a minute anyway. And if you swap it to another ally, it just means you can't be using your action to give an ally a boost every round. You can't infinitely do that for the combat. It's whatever. And I do want to mention it is once the spell ends, they're immune for a minute, not from the start of the cast. So you can't do it 1 minute, then 1 minute, then 1 minute. You do it for 1 minute, wait a minute, then another minute, that kind of stuff. Still, Stoke the Heart is really good and amazing for a support caster, especially because this comes with one of the only divine caster or divine tradition witch patrons out there. I think this is a really good one to add to your kit. Clinging Ice is probably the best attack hex cantrip that a witch gets access to. It is a basic reflex saving throw. They attack. It's not actually an attack action, which is good to know, which means you can use Clinging Ice and an attack spell without reducing your multi-attack penalty. But what's really good about it is it does a decent amount, a d4 damage per spell level. Pretty solid basic reflex saving throw. And if they fail, they get a -5 status penalty to their speed, which can be utterly devastating. But you know what's worse than that? A -10 if they crit fail. And that can be sustained up to a minute. This is a really good hex cantrip. Like many of the other hex cantrip, the target is then immune to its effects for a minute, so you can't attack with it all the time. But it's a really good damaging spell. Because it's a reflex spell, you're at least doing some damage to the target more often than not. And, speed penalties are a huge deal when it comes to Pathfinder and getting around characters. Kiting is a real thing, especially because most enemies don't have attack of opportunity. It allows your allies to come in, pop out, and, pretty much punish the enemy for their speed. It's really good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get into the feats. I do want to say this video might be a little bit longer than I'm trying some new stuff with the editing, so I apologize. But hopefully this doesn't take too long. So let's go ahead and get into it. Cackle. Honestly, a really good feat for a variety of reasons. What it really boils down to is you can sustain a spell using a focus point. Now, that doesn't really seem like a lot of value, especially with how valuable focus points can be. But one of the things about Cackle that's really good is if you need that action for whatever reason, you need to move or you need to cast another spell or something, Cackle is there to give you that focus point or that sustain that you need to keep your spell going. A really good pocket pick if you're a human and you want to get like an extra feat for level 1, and one of the more hidden OP aspects of this one, it lets you have 2 summons at once. Most summoning spells take 3 actions a cast, and then you have to sustain it every round. With this, you can summon a creature, next round, use a focus point to Cackle to keep that creature up, and summon another creature. Then for the rest of the combat, you sustain with 2 actions, and you still can use your Hex cantrips with your last action, since most of them only take 1 action. It's really good. It's much more personally for your character passive way to play, but you do have 2 additional summons to mess around with, and there's a lot of really cool summons in the game, so Cackle's a really good early feat to pick up. Living hair, and is going to be a bit of a trend. I like a lot of the physical aspects of the witch feats, which I didn't think so at first. Living hair is really cool. It's a D4 bludgeoning weapon that is agile, finesse, has disarm and trip on it. That's super versatile. And the good thing about it is they benefit from hand wraps and mighty blows. So your item bonus to your hand wraps can increase your trip and disarm with the hair and increase the damage that it can do. Also, it specifically writes in the description that you can even use your eyebrows. And I just think beating someone down, literally browbeating someone down, I think is hilarious and it's really cool. It's a really interesting aspect. And not only that, it's super subtle. Characters aren't going to think your hair is a living weapon, especially if it's your eyebrows. And you can do a lot of really cool things with it. Keeping in line with those physical aspects I was mentioned before, Eldritch Nails is actually a really cool feat. I didn't really think so at first because when you initially read it, you get the basics. It's a D6 agile slashing weapon, which is cool. Agile D6 weapons are a little on the rarer side and, it can be some pretty good damage. It also allows you to etch runes onto your fingernails specifically that only work for your nail attacks. What that means is if you go a martial artist style witch, you can have 2 sets of unarmed runes, one for your nail attacks and one for any other unarmed attacks you can do, like living hair. So you can actually have a variety of options in combat based on the types of runes you put onto your hand wraps and your Eldritch Nails. I think that's really cool. That's a lot of diversity that it gives you. And on top of all of this, for a single feat I might add, whenever you use a non-cantrip hex that takes 2 actions or more, and if you're adjacent to your target, you can actually, as a part of that casting, strike the target. Not using your spell casting modifier, which, again, I think is a little weird, especially because witches don't have the best when it comes to their... I mean, they're not bad. It's just they're not the best. Still, you can strike instead for both, dealing the strike damage and applying the hex. I think it's really interesting. I think it's a really cool way to really make an unarmed witch seem really interesting. You get a lot of options. You essentially get a spell strike, which again, before the Magus even came out, other characters kind of had a spell strike-like ability. I think it's really cool. Eldritch Nails feels very aesthetic, and because you can put runes on it, they can be good for the rest of the game as well. It's just a complete win. All right, the last set of feats I really want to talk about are the basic, greater, and major lessons that the witch can get. Now, these are really cool because they add a hex focus spell to your spell list and your familiar learns a spell in addition with the hex cantrip that might, or not hex cantrip, hex focus spell. And the spell's tradition might not even be the one that you have. You could get primal spells. For instance, if you take like the Lesson of Elements, and you can get Burning Hands even if you're a divine caster, even if you're an occult caster. This is a good way to diversify your spell list even more and to pick up additional focus spells and get more focus points to do a lot of the cool focus spells that witches actually get access to. And another thing I thought was really interesting, if there's a level that you don't like any of the lessons for, you don't have to pick these up in order. You can skip basic lessons and go right to greater lessons. And you could skip greater and just go right for my major. Now, of course, they have certain feat level requirements, and so you have to be at certain levels to get them. What I'm just saying is that you don't have to overburden your feat load trying to get lessons from later tiers. You can pick up the lessons you want when you get access to them, and I think that's really good and honestly kind of rare in Pathfinder. A lot of it is kind of like a feat tree in a lot of ways, but this one surprisingly is not. I think it's really good for helping diversify your witch's spell list and for giving you really good focus spells as well. It's really, really good, and I wish I could go into all the lessons, but this video would take a lot of time, and we're already kind of crunching it with what I've talked about so far. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end it for this episode here today. But the Witch, my final synopsis, I guess, really good. Their familiars give them a lot of options, but I think the thing that makes the Witch the best is the Witch doesn't come from you from a certain angle. It has a lot of options. Witches have their familiars, they have unique feats to attack in unique ways. The Witch is a really cool spellcaster, and they're a lot more than just a spellcaster. They got narrative baked into them. They got all kinds of cool, storytelling aspects with their familiar, their patron, or even their party and how their party looks at them. There's just endless amounts of story, so much potential, and you can play a witch in so many ways. Support, full attack, skill-based, all of that, and it works really well with the Witch. I highly recommend it, and I highly recommend you try them in your next game as well. But with that, we're going to go ahead and end this episode. Thank you all so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this, or at the very least, show a friend, link this somewhere so that other people can see it who may like it. It really helps the channel out a lot. We're growing really fast. We're already at over 400 subscribers. We'll probably be at the 1,000 subscriber, mark sometime in March. That's my guess, end of March, early April, maybe even May. And then we'll be an official YouTube channel. And I want to thank everyone for getting us this far. And please join us. There's a Discord link down in the description below where you can join our growing community. And I always recruit there first for any of the games I'm running on my channel. So if you want a chance to play with me and my friends, please check us out down there. But good night, or good day, good morning. It was when this comes out. I gotta finish. I really gotta fine tune my outro a bit. Forgive me, please. I'm still relatively new at this. Good luck with your games. Leave the bad luck to me, and I'll see you all next time.